Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I never thought a single conversation could dismantle everything I had built, every hope I had carried silently for years. But that afternoon changed the world I had lived in for 12 years. My name is Ethan, 38, and I had spent most of my adult life thinking that love, loyalty, and quiet sacrifice were enough to sustain a marriage. I met Olivia when I was 25, fresh out of college, ambitious but grounded. She was vivacious, magnetic, full of laughter that made every room brighter. At first, I wasn't the type to chase anyone, but she had this way of looking at me, as though she saw the core of who I was. And I loved that. For a long time, things were simple. Late-night conversations about dreams and fears, small gestures of love, weekend hikes through winding trails, cooking together on rainy afternoons, and endless laughter that echoed in the empty corners of our apartment. We weren't perfect, but we were content. I thought contentment was enough. But life doesn't stay content for long. Careers grew demanding. Responsibilities multiplied, and slowly, imperceptibly, the warmth began to fade. It started with subtle changes. Olivia would arrive home late, exhausted, often disappearing into her phone or laptop, smiling absent-mindedly when I tried to talk. I attributed it to work stress, long hours, endless emails. I learned to give her space, to adjust my expectations, to hide the small pangs of hurt that came when she ignored me. I told myself patience was a virtue, loyalty a badge of honor. So I kept smiling, cooking, maintaining our home, trying not to notice the way her laughter no longer followed my jokes or the way she flinched when I reached for her hand. I remember the night I realized how far we had drifted. It was unremarkable at first. A Thursday, ordinary. The soft hum of our living room, the glow of the streetlights through the curtains. I approached her gently, sitting beside her on the sofa, not touching her, not crowding her, just sitting, hoping for a sliver of connection. My voice was calm, careful. "Olivia, can we talk?" She exhaled loudly, muting the TV, her eyes a mix of impatience and something I couldn't decipher. "What now?" she asked, as if I were disturbing her schedule of distractions. I took a deep breath, weighing my words like a fragile object I didn't want to break. I miss us. I miss feeling close to you. I miss us the way we were. There was silence, a pause, so heavy it pressed against my chest. Then she said it plainly, coldly, and with a finality that will haunt me forever. "I don't feel that way anymore. You're not important to me." I froze. My mind raced, not in anger, but in disbelief. Years of shared moments, promises, quiet sacrifices, vanished in a single sentence. The room seemed to shrink, the air thickening around me. I stared at her face, searching for any trace of the woman I had loved, any flicker of warmth, apology, or uncertainty. But there was nothing. She turned back to the TV, unmuting it, as if the conversation had never happened. For a moment, I considered speaking, begging, pleading even, but no words could undo the reality. I had been a man invisible in his own home, carrying the weight of a love unreciprocated, unnoticed, unloved. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, tracing the lines of years past. The first time she smiled at me in a crowded room, the small late-night conversations, the weekend hikes, the laughter that used to fill the apartment. Each memory felt like a shard of glass, beautiful but sharp, cutting through the illusion that anything remained. The next morning, I made a decision I had been avoiding for months without even realizing it. I didn't pack dramatically. I didn't slam doors or leave angry notes. I moved quietly with precision. Clothes, essentials, my phone charger, everything minimal, nothing theatrical. I wanted no scene, no spectacle. I wanted only to vanish from a life that no longer held space for me. Before leaving, I paused by the living room window, watching her as she prepared for her morning routine, oblivious to the quiet storm building beside her. She sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone, the same disinterested expression from the night before. And I realized that my presence, my attempt at closeness, my entire identity in this marriage had been irrelevant for months. perhaps years. That clarity, cold as it was, brought an unexpected calm. I walked out the door, the click of the lock behind me echoing like the end of a chapter. The street outside was quiet, early morning light casting long shadows. I didn't look back. I drove without a destination, just a road stretching ahead, a blank canvas for the first time in years. Every mile felt like reclamation, like shedding invisible chains. For the first time since I stopped being noticed, I felt my pulse sync with my own existence again. Not hers, not the life I had lost. I spent the day wandering, thinking, reflecting. The shock had passed, replaced by a strange mixture of liberation and grief. By evening, I had called a close friend, someone who had silently observed my struggles and who knew the truth of our marriage. He didn't need details. He only needed to know I was okay, and that I had reclaimed a part of myself that had been dormant far too long. But even as I felt the relief, I knew this was only the beginning. Leaving wasn't just about walking away from her. It was about walking toward a life where my worth wasn't measured by indifference. And in that quiet, empty evening, I understood something fundamental. No love, no matter how patient, should render you invisible. And from this moment on, I would be seen, if not by her, then by myself. The night after I left, I didn't sleep in the comfort of a familiar bed. Instead, I sprawled across my friend Derek's couch, the hum of the city outside blending with the whirlwind of thoughts in my head. Derek had been a silent witness to my marriage's slow decline, a friend who understood the weight of invisible hurt. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. He just handed me a beer and let the silence speak. And in that silence, I began to plot the next steps. Not revenge, not drama, but something far more profound, reclaiming myself. By the next morning, the reality of her absence hit me harder than I expected. Olivia's indifference had been a slow erosion, but the tangible void, the emptiness of our shared apartment, made everything irreversibly real. I realized I had been holding on to a ghost, clinging to a relationship that had ceased to exist long before the words were spoken. It was ironic. Her act of dismissal had liberated me more than any argument or tearful confrontation ever could. And yet, part of me couldn't shake the need to understand, to see if she would even notice the absence she had insisted upon. That evening, I returned briefly, not to confront, not to plead, but to collect the remnants of the life we once shared. The apartment smelled faintly of her perfume, the scent clinging to the air like a stubborn memory. I moved quietly through rooms, gathering essentials, pausing at objects that once held significance. The photo frames of our first hike, the coffee mugs we'd painted together, the tiny cactus on the kitchen sill she had insisted on keeping alive. Each item was a reminder of love that had quietly slipped away. As I packed, a sudden sound from the hallway froze me. A soft knock on the door. My heart skipped, a visceral reminder that fear still lurked beneath the veneer of calm. I opened it cautiously. There stood Hannah, Olivia's best friend, eyes wide but tired, a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't place. "Ethan," she started, voice hesitant. I saw you leave. I didn't know what else to do." I studied her for a moment, measuring the weight of this unexpected intrusion. She wasn't here to plead on Olivia's behalf. I could tell. There was no manipulation in her expression, only concern tinged with silent understanding. I nodded slightly, keeping my voice even. She told me I was no longer important. I said, simply. Hannah looked down, biting her lip. I saw it coming. I just didn't think it would be so final. That was the irony. She hadn't witnessed the slow suffocation I endured, the years of trying, hoping, giving, and receiving silence in return. And now, standing here, I realized that my life was no longer tethered to her whims, her indifference, or the empty promises that had defined our marriage. The next days blurred into a rhythm of quiet independence. I found a small apartment, close to work, with a balcony that overlooked the city skyline. I began routines I had abandoned. Morning runs, coffee at the small corner cafe, evenings with books that weren't just self-help, but stories that reminded me of resilience and courage. The freedom, though tinged with lingering grief, was intoxicating. I could breathe without constraint, think without fear of judgment, and exist without invisibility. Weeks later, News reached me. Olivia had been asking around, calling friends, even attempting to reach me indirectly. But I had vanished from the life she claimed I no longer belonged to. No calls returned. No social media updates. The man she dismissed had disappeared. And with his disappearance, the power balance had shifted. It was never about punishment. It was about reclaiming control, about showing that my life, my energy, and my presence were not commodities to be ignored. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. I ran into Olivia at a local grocery store. She froze, eyes wide, searching my expression as if trying to gauge the man who had once been tethered to her whims. I smiled faintly, a mixture of empathy and quiet triumph. She opened her mouth, likely to speak, but I didn't wait. I nodded politely and walked past her, letting the silence between us speak volumes. It was a moment of unspoken understanding. I had moved on, and the absence of confrontation made the truth clearer than any argument ever could. In the following months, I rebuilt not only my routines, but my sense of self. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, traveled to places I had always wanted to see, and explored passions that had lain dormant under the weight of compromise. Every small victory reinforced a lesson that had been painfully earned. No one has a right to make you invisible in your own life. Looking back, I understand now that leaving wasn't a single act. It was a process, a series of quiet decisions that gradually restored my dignity. The betrayal wasn't dramatic. There was no infidelity, no explosive confrontation, just an absence of love, a withdrawal of importance, and the slow realization that a life lived for someone else's approval is no life at all. By the time Olivia reached out indirectly through mutual friends, I had already become a man untethered by her choices. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence was more powerful than any words could be. She had told me I was no longer important. I had shown her and myself that I always had been. My disappearance wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life. And in that reclamation, I discovered something I had forgotten along the way: the unshakable power of knowing your worth.